At 9 years old, I walked out of a gas station holding a bottle of water, only to realize the car was gone. My father had driven off. No goodbye, no explanation, just vanished as if I had never existed. For years, I told myself it was a mistake, that maybe they got lost, that maybe they'd come back, but they never did. 22 years later, that same man showed up again, not with an apology, but with a lawsuit, claiming half of the house my grandmother left me, the same house she fought for when he abandoned me, the same house I built my entire life around. And what they didn't know was that I had kept everything, every paper, every recording, every silent proof of what they did. This is how I fought back, not with screams, but with truth. And this time, I wasn't 9 anymore. My name is Elena Reed. I'm 31 years old, a practicing civil rights attorney based in Austin, Texas. From the outside, I suppose my life might look like something pulled from a self-help podcast. Degree from Columbia, my own firm, a quiet townhome with sage-colored walls and a cat named Benson. No husband, no family visits, just peace, or so I thought. 2 weeks ago, that illusion shattered. The phone rang just after 2 a.m. I never pick up calls at that hour, but something made me answer. On the other end was a nurse, her voice clipped but gentle. "There's a man here, badly injured in a highway accident. He's been asking for someone named Elena Reed. Said, you're his daughter." For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. That name, his name, hadn't crossed my mind in years. David Reed, my biological father, the man who left me at a gas station off Route 191 when I was 9. Left me standing alone on a cracked pavement, holding a cold bottle of water I'd just bought for him. I hung up without responding. My hands trembled. The past didn't knock, it barged in. Sleep never came. Instead, my mind replayed the day I'd buried so deep it felt almost mythical, but the details had never left me. I remembered the sky first, pale blue and untrustworthy, the kind of sky that promises sun but delivers storms. I remembered the feel of cracked leather beneath my legs in the back of our aging Dodge Caravan. My doll, grimy from years of clinging, sat in my lap. In the front seat, David and Veronica, my stepmother, were arguing, as usual. Not yelling exactly, just hissing words that smelled like debt, like fear, like someone was one step from giving up. That day was supposed to be a road trip to visit an aunt I barely knew, but looking back, I think it was a setup, a way to remove me from the picture without drawing suspicion. We stopped at a rundown gas station. There was no store, just a tiny shack selling chips and lukewarm drinks. David turned, eyes unreadable. "Elena, sweetheart, go grab me a bottle of water." Those were the last words he ever said to me. I came back out, proud to be helpful, but the van was gone. Just gone. No engine hum, no dust trail, no goodbye. I stood frozen, for minutes, for hours, for a lifetime. A man in blue overalls, station attendant, approached. He didn't ask what happened, he just said, "Come on, honey," and led me inside. The rest was a blur. Police, questions, warm juice in a cracked cup. Then came my savior, my grandmother Ruby. Her white hair pinned tight, her arms wide open. When I ran into her, she didn't ask anything. She just whispered, "You're safe now." In that moment, she became my everything. Now, decades later, I was being pulled back to the place I'd escaped. The man who discarded me had spoken my name again. Why now? I sat in my kitchen, staring at my untouched cup of tea. My phone still on the table, screen dim. Was he dying? Was it guilt? A scam? I didn't care. What I cared about was the storm he was bringing. I wasn't 9 anymore. I wasn't the girl clutching a water bottle, eyes wide with betrayal. I was Elena Reed. But even strong women bleed in silence. And that call reopened every wound I'd spent years pretending had healed. It was supposed to be a simple trip, just a drive across state lines to visit Aunt Meredith in Shreveport. I remember clutching my stuffed bunny, Mr. Pickle, in the back seat, tracing raindrops that crawled down the foggy window. The air smelled like burnt coffee and exhaust. I hadn't had lunch, and my stomach kept making small, aching noises that I tried to ignore. Up front, David was focused on the road. Veronica was scrolling through her flip phone, muttering about bills. They barely spoke to me. Actually, they barely acknowledged I was there. Since my mother passed the previous winter, stroke, sudden and silent, everything changed. David remarried within 4 months, and just like that, I became an afterthought. Veronica never hid her distaste for me. When David was around, she played the part, smiling, polite, maybe even maternal. But when it was just the two of us, the mask dropped. I was the mess her new life had inherited, and she wasn't shy about reminding me. That day, the tension was unbearable. Every bump in the road felt like a question no one wanted to ask. Somewhere past the state line, David abruptly turned into a dusty old gas station. One of those middle-of-nowhere places with one pump and a shack that looked like it belonged in a ghost town. "Elena," he said, voice neutral, "go grab me a bottle of water." I looked up at him, hopeful he'd say something else. Maybe crack a smile, call me Pumpkin like he used to, but nothing came. I slipped out of the car, bunny in one hand, a crumpled dollar in the other. Inside, the shack was dim and smelled like rubber and mold. I found the coldest bottle I could. I even picked a blue one. I knew he liked those. When I came out, the sun hit my eyes and I blinked. The car was gone. At first, I thought they were just circling the lot. Or maybe David forgot something and pulled around back. I stood on my toes, scanned the edges of the gravel road. Nothing. No dust, no engine rumble, no goodbye. I stood there for 27 minutes. I counted each one. Eventually, the old man at the register walked outside. "You okay, kid?" "My dad," I said, voice shaking. "He asked me to get him water and now he's gone." The man led me back inside, sat me down, handed me a paper cup of orange soda. He made a phone call, then another. I stared at my bunny. His ear was fraying. Police came. Questions, names, addresses I didn't know. A lady officer with kind eyes wrapped me in a blanket even though it was summer. And then she walked in. Ruby Reed, hair tight in a bun, wrinkles from worry etched deep. She didn't say much, just opened her arms. I ran into them, and for the first time that day I let myself cry. That moment, it didn't erase the pain, but it planted something I'd spend the next 2 decades growing. A sense that even if the world forgot me, someone hadn't. Someone still wanted me. And that would have to be enough. For now, Ruby wasn't just a grandmother. She was a one-woman lifeboat in the middle of an ocean I hadn't even known I was drowning in. When she took me home that night, the house smelled like cinnamon and old wood. A single lamp in the corner lit the living room with a warm, golden glow. There was a blanket folded perfectly over the couch, a teacup waiting on the table, long since cooled. As if she'd paused her entire life just in case I ever came back. I slept in her guest room that first night. The sheets smelled like lavender. I didn't say much. I didn't need to. She didn't press. In the morning, she made pancakes shaped like stars. No questions, no judgment, just love, quiet, steady, unconditional. It wasn't until months later that I overheard her on the phone with a social worker, her voice firm and shaking. "She's not going back. I'll fight this in every court in Texas if I have to." And she did fight. She fought to get full custody. She fought to get my school records transferred. She fought to make sure David and Veronica could never take me back, not out of spite, but out of protection. She worked part-time at a local bookstore and taught piano lessons on weekends. Money was tight, but she never once made me feel like I was a burden. When I needed new shoes, she found coupons. When I wanted to join the school art club, she baked muffins to help fundraise. She made my Halloween costumes by hand, stayed up with me during every cold and fever, and taught me to knit when I couldn't sleep. And she listened. When I cried about not being invited to birthday parties, when I asked why other kids had moms and dads at the school play, when I admitted that I sometimes wished David would show up, even if just to apologize. Ruby never spoke ill of him, not once. But I could see it in her eyes, the quiet fury of a mother watching her son become a stranger to his own blood. She used to say, "People will try to define you by what you lost, but I want you to be known for how you grew." By the time I was 15, I didn't just admire Ruby, I wanted to become her. Kind, resilient, brave without being loud. She was the one who taught me how to hold pain gently, like a fragile heirloom you carry without letting it break. She was the reason I believed in good people. She was the reason I survived. And someday I knew I'd carry her name in a way that made the world see what love, real, intentional, sacrificial love can do. Grief doesn't come all at once. It seeps in like a slow leak in the ceiling, soft at first, then suddenly it collapses everything. When Ruby passed away, I thought I was prepared. I thought, after all the strength she had given me, I could hold myself upright without her. But when I came home from the funeral, a small, quiet ceremony under the rustling pecan trees at Fairview Cemetery, I walked into a silence so deep it rang in my ears. The teacup she used every morning still sat on the counter. Her slippers were still tucked under the sofa. Her reading glasses rested open on a crossword puzzle only half filled. I wasn't alone in the world, but I was no longer tethered. 3 days after we laid her to rest, I got a call from Mr. Langston, our longtime family attorney. "Elena," he said, voice calm as always, "I think it's time we sit down and go over your grandmother's estate. She left everything in order. But there is one complication." I drove to his office the next morning. The place hadn't changed in years, still smelled like cedar and dust. Langston wore the same navy suit, a little shinier at the elbows now. He handed me a manila folder and slid a document across the table. "She left you the house, her savings, the car, Even her recipe box, he said with a soft smile. But the property deed is still jointly held, with your biological father. I blinked. I'm sorry, what? David Reed, he said. Your grandmother tried to transfer full ownership to you after gaining legal custody, but because he never signed the release back in 2002, the deed still legally lists both names. It felt like someone had poured cold water down my back. That name, it was like a ghost stepping into the room. He's alive? I asked, though I already knew. That call from the hospital wasn't a fluke. That wasn't just a nightmare. Does he know she passed? Langston nodded solemnly. I sent him a certified letter. He replied, he's coming to Texas later this week to discuss the title. I didn't respond. There were no words in that moment, only the sound of pen on paper as I signed documents that felt like they belonged to someone else's life. That night I sat at the kitchen table, the same one where Ruby and I used to play Scrabble after dinner. I stared at the deed, my name printed next to David's like we were partners in something. Partners in abandonment? Partners in silence? The audacity of that paper, to pretend he was still part of this home, part of this life, was unbearable. I thought of Ruby's voice. I thought of her saying, "Don't be afraid to face what hurt you. Just don't let it define you." I opened the bottom drawer of her desk. Inside, tucked beneath old tax forms and expired coupons, was a letter she had written. On the envelope, in her handwriting, "Elena, if the past ever comes knocking." I unfolded the letter slowly. Her words were steady, clear. "If you're reading this, it means you've become the woman I always knew you'd be. I tried everything to protect you, but some things remain unfinished. You don't owe him forgiveness, you owe yourself peace. Do what's right, not for him, but for you." I pressed the letter to my chest. The ache didn't disappear, but it found a place to rest. David Reed was coming back into my life. But this time I wouldn't be 9 years old, I wouldn't be silent. I would meet him, not as his daughter, but as the rightful keeper of everything he walked away from. The knock on the door came exactly at 4 o'clock, just as the wind picked up, rustling the wind chimes Ruby had hung by the porch. I had been expecting it. I had even boiled a fresh pot of Earl Grey, not out of hospitality, but as something to anchor my hands, something warm to counter the chill I knew was coming. When I opened the door, they stood there, David Reed and Veronica, my ghosts. He looked older, of course, his once dark hair now graying, creases etched into his face that hadn't been there when I last saw him at 9 years old. He wore a brown corduroy jacket that hung awkwardly on his frame, like he had borrowed it from a better version of himself. And Veronica? She hadn't changed. Same tight smile, same red lipstick. A scarf wrapped elegantly around her neck, like she was stepping into brunch instead of walking into the house of a woman they once abandoned. "Elena," David said, voice cautious, "you've grown so much." I said nothing, just stepped aside and let the door swing wider. They walked in like strangers do, cautiously, curiously. David looked around the living room, his eyes lingering on the family photos, the embroidered pillows, the tea set Ruby always kept on display. "This place hasn't changed," he murmured. "Your grandmother, she had a way of keeping things just so." I sat across from them on the old couch, the cushion beside me still bearing the faint dent where Ruby used to sit. I didn't offer tea. I didn't offer anything. David cleared his throat. "We're here to talk about the property. We know our visit might be unexpected, but we didn't know where else to go." Veronica leaned in then, her voice honeyed but strained. "We've had some financial trouble. The business failed. We lost our house. We just need a place to stay for a little while, just until we get back on our feet." Her words hung in the air like stale perfume. I studied her, not just her words, but her eyes, still cold, still calculating. The same eyes that once watched me cry in silence, offering no comfort. The same woman who used to whisper, "You're not my problem," when David wasn't listening. "And you came here," I said slowly, "because you think this house belongs to you." David raised his palms as if to pacify me. "Legally, I'm still on the deed. I never wanted to make things difficult. We just thought, maybe there's a way to cohabitate, temporarily." Cohabitate. That word settled in my chest like a weight. As if we were strangers applying for roommates, instead of a daughter sitting across from the people who once left her behind. I stood up quietly. Their faces shifted. David hopeful, Veronica already smoothing her scarf as if she'd won. But I walked to the front door and opened it wide. The wind rushed in, crisp, dry, final. "I think this conversation ends here," I said, my voice steady. Veronica was the first to rise. Her mouth opened as if to protest, but she thought better of it. David lingered. He reached out, hand hovering near my shoulder, but I stepped back. That distance said everything. "I truly am sorry," he whispered, eyes cast downward. I didn't answer. They left. No slamming doors, no dramatic exit, just the slow sound of retreat. When the latch clicked behind them, I didn't collapse. I didn't cry. I simply walked back to the living room and sat beside Ruby's old cushion. I picked up my untouched cup of tea, still warm, still bitter, just like everything they had left behind. The envelope came 3 weeks later, cream-colored thick paper, the kind reserved for weddings or threats. The return address read, Blake and Harmon, attorneys at law. I didn't need to open it to know what was inside. I did anyway. Inside was a formal complaint. David and Veronica were suing me for division of joint property. The house, my home, the only home I had ever known. They claimed I was denying access to what was legally half theirs, that I was occupying the house in bad faith, that they had attempted dialogue and been met with hostility. I laughed, not bitterly, just a quiet, stunned sound, like finding an old wound bleeding again when you thought it had scarred. They really thought I'd just fold. I called Angela, law school friend, 10 years deep in civil litigation with a voice like a gavel and a memory like a courtroom transcript. I've got a situation, I said. She replied instantly, tell me everything. I brought her everything, my grandmother's will, the original guardianship documents, photos from the gas station, the police report from 2002. Then I opened the small, locked safe Ruby kept in her sewing cabinet and pulled out the one thing she never mentioned. A private agreement signed by David Reed in 2006, relinquishing his rights to the property in exchange for a lump sum payment of $5,000, wired directly from Ruby's account. It was never notarized, but attached was a bank receipt, transfer details, and his signature in ink. Angela whistled low. You're sitting on a legal arsenal. Let's use it, I said. Over the next week, we drafted a counterclaim, line by line, brick by brick. We added character affidavits from former neighbors who remembered Ruby raising me alone. We located archived footage from the gas station surveillance camera, still stored on the county server. We subpoenaed hospital records from Veronica's brief psychiatric treatment at Silvergate Medical, sealed in family court but admissible in property proceedings. Angela was relentless. You want this clean, public, and airtight? She asked. Public, I replied. No closed room mediation. They deserve to hear it read out loud. The morning of the hearing, I wore a gray suit Ruby once helped him. No makeup, no jewelry, just me. Angela and I walked into the courtroom with 3 folders and unshakable silence. David and Veronica were already seated. He looked tense. She wore black, as if mourning something she had already lost. Their attorney, gray-haired, polished, opened with a heartfelt monologue about family reconciliation, hardship, and shared rights. When the judge turned to me, I stood. I didn't shake, I didn't shout. Angela handled the voice. I brought the truth. She laid out everything, the abandonment, the police report, the guardianship. She presented the private agreement, the bank records, the gas station footage, still blurry but clear enough to show me, small and waiting, with a bottle of water in my hand. Then came the audio, a recording Ruby had made on a cheap cassette deck, her telling David, I paid your tuition, your rent, your wife's debts, but you won't take this house from your daughter. His voice answered, just let me borrow it, Mom, I'll make it right. When the judge asked if the voice was his, David didn't deny it. Angela ended with a simple line. The defendant is not withholding a home, she is protecting it. Silence filled the courtroom like a verdict. And somewhere deep in my chest, I felt Ruby standing beside me. Not in memory, in power. The courtroom was quiet. Not the nervous kind of quiet that comes before an argument, but the heavy, expectant silence that settles just before a final decision. The judge, an older woman with silver-streaked hair and eyes sharp enough to cut steel, glanced at the final page in her folder. Then she looked up, first at Angela, then at me. Miss Reed, she said calmly, and Mr. and Mrs. Reed, this court has reviewed the presented evidence, including the original deed, financial transactions, sworn testimony, guardianship documents, and supplemental exhibits. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. It is the opinion of this court that Mr. David Reed and Mrs. Veronica Reed no longer retain any legal, moral, or custodial interest in the property located at 221 Laurel Street, Austin, Texas. My hands remained still in my lap, my breath held firm in my chest. The property is hereby transferred in full to Miss Elena Reed, sole heir of the late Margaret Ruby Reed and custodian of record. I didn't cry, not there, not in front of them. But inside, something unknotted. Something that had been clenched tight since the day I stood in the sun with that bottle of water and waited. The judge looked back down at her papers, but before closing the file, she added one more note. In addition, she said, her tone sharpening, the court grants a protective order for a period of 10 years. Neither Mr. nor Mrs. Reed may contact Miss Reed directly or indirectly, nor approach her residence or workplace. Angela gently touched my arm, her signal to exhale. Veronica's face crumpled, not in sorrow, in disbelief, like a chess player who finally sees checkmate. David didn't say a word. He just nodded once, whether out of understanding or shame I couldn't tell. maybe it didn't matter. When I left the courthouse, the sky was wide open. The air smelled like late spring, citrus and dust and distant rain. I walked with Angela to her car, hugged her tight, then turned back and walked alone down the sidewalk. The house was quiet when I returned. The late afternoon sun poured through the lace curtains Ruby had sewn decades ago. I sat at the dining table, the one with the scratch from my science project in 7th grade, and I let it all go. The fear, the guilt, the wondering. I let it bleed into the floorboards, into the walls, into the quiet hum of a home finally at peace. That night, my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. I answered. "Elena," a rough voice said. "David, I know we're not supposed to talk. I won't call again. I wanted to say I'm sorry for all of it. I thought I was doing what was easier. I thought I'd forgotten. But today, I remembered everything. You standing there, that bottle in your hand. I've remembered it every night." I didn't reply. "Anyway," he added, "take care of the house. She loved it. She loved you." Click. I stared at the phone, then set it face down. Ruby once told me, closure isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a door that stays shut and you don't knock again. She was right. That door had closed, quietly but firmly. And I wouldn't open it again. I started the renovations 1 week after the final ruling. Not because I wanted to erase the past, but because I wanted to honor it. This house had seen everything. Betrayal, healing, court papers, piano recitals, silent tears, and birthday candles. It deserved a new chapter. I kept the curtains Ruby had made, patched up the kitchen tiles she loved, and replaced the old guest room furniture with beanbags, art supplies, and tiny wooden desks. Then I gave it a name, the Olive Nest. Ruby once told me olive trees survive the harshest droughts because their roots grow deeper instead of wider. That's what I wanted this house to be, for kids like me, the ones who'd been left behind, the ones standing in parking lots holding bottles of water, waiting for someone who would never come back. The Olive Nest became a temporary haven for children in transition, those waiting for placement, for foster homes, for anything that felt steady. It wasn't a shelter. It wasn't an institution. It was a warm, quiet stopover between the storm and the calm. The first night I had 3 kids. A 6-year-old girl named Lily, who never let go of a pink stuffed flamingo. A boy named Devin, 9, who listened to music through broken headphones and didn't speak for 2 days. And Miguel, 7, who cried every time someone closed a door too loudly. I made pancakes the next morning. Not because I had to, but because that's what Ruby would have done. Some nights were hard. One evening, Lily woke up screaming from a nightmare, clutching the flamingo like it was the last safe thing in the world. I sat beside her, didn't ask questions, just stayed. Devin tore down the drawings on the wall after someone accidentally moved his backpack. Miguel once tried to run. But over time, the air inside the house shifted. Laughter began to echo down the hallway. Crayon drawings returned to the walls. They started calling it home. One rainy Thursday afternoon, Lily came into the kitchen while I folded laundry. She climbed onto a stool and asked, "Miss Elena, have you ever been left somewhere?" The question landed softly. I set down a towel and looked at her. "Yes," I said. "I was 9. It was hot and I had a bottle of water in my hand. I waited, but no one came back." Lily blinked, then nodded like she understood something deeper than words. "But someone found me," I added, "and gave me a home." She slid the flamingo onto the counter between us. "This is yours now, you can borrow it." That night, after the dishes were done and the hallway lights dimmed, I stepped out onto the back porch. The wind chimes clinked gently in the dark. I looked out at the yard where Ruby once planted wildflowers. A few were blooming again. Maybe grief never really ends. Maybe healing is just giving your story a place to rest, so it can carry others too. I didn't rewrite what had happened to me. I just built something stronger on top of it. Something rooted. Something real. Something that would never, ever leave a child behind again. Maybe you were never left at a gas station. Maybe your wounds don't look like mine. But if you've ever been made to feel invisible, forgotten by the very people who should have protected you, then you know what it means to build a life from the ashes of betrayal. And maybe, just maybe, the strongest kind of justice doesn't always come from courtrooms. Sometimes it comes from the quiet choice to break the cycle, to become the person they never were for you. If this story touched something inside you, if it reminded you of your own quiet resilience, don't keep it to yourself. Share it, leave a comment, tell your story, and if you believe in the power of rising again, hit subscribe. Because here on Sweet Revenge Happy Ending, we don't just tell stories, we reclaim them.